Then you have the Ra in the early 90s. Mullah Omar and his cadre put together the Taliban. And they, with an explicit anti-warlord message. And it resonated with the Afghan people who were tired of the warlords, who were tired of the Afghan civil war that broke out post-Soviet withdrawal. And they quickly gained ground and took control of about anywhere from 80 to 90% of Afghanistan. What became the Northern Alliance, Golden, I'm sorry, not Hekmatyar, but with Massud's people and a whole slew of other Afghan warlords, they bottle up in northeastern Afghanistan, create the Northern Alliance. And this is the group that was warning us just prior to 9/11 that the al-Qaeda was deeply in bed with the Taliban and that there was a threat coming. And I think the Taliban understood this explicitly, and they assassinated Ahmed Shah Massud just 2 days on September 9th. That's when I remember reading that. And this was even before I got into this business, that I remember, wow, I saw that assassination. Again, this was like in 2001, the early days of the internet. Well, I guess like the opening of the internet, it was hard to get information. Still getting information via magazines, but some online. But I remember reading that online and being like, wow, that's an interesting development. And then 2 days later, the planes fly in the buildings.
Didn't they rig a video camera with explosives? Yeah.
Yes, they had two reporters, right?
Yeah.
That they put a bomb in a camera. They got a meeting with Massud and they detonated. Yeah, it was a brilliant plot. And they did that because they wanted to weaken. They knew that, right after 9/11, the U.S. would invade and they wanted to take out the most effective commander. And he was an effective commander despite his shortcomings, whatever they may have been. He was an effective leader and one who was greatly respected by many Afghans. And, I always wonder what would have happened if he hadn't been killed, if he had survived that, or if that assassination attempt never happened. Could have Afghanistan been a different place? But I think the CIA was pretty hell-bent on getting a Pashtun in charge of Afghanistan, and we're probably always going to go with Hamid Karzai. So that's the origins of, so again, even so for almost 20 years, for about 16 years, Afghanistan was in the midst of a civil war. Even the Taliban took over the country, I would probably argue around by like 1996, 95, 96, they consolidated control over most of the areas of Afghanistan. They created their Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is back today. They started their, we have seen those videos, right, of the beheadings and the soccer fields and the stonings. And so Afghanistan was somewhat at peace. The Taliban were constantly fighting the Northern Alliance, but that piece of the Taliban is always anything but peaceful. They're imposing their harsh version of Sharia on the people of Afghanistan, and foreign terrorist organizations are coming into Afghanistan and fighting alongside Turkestan Islamic Party. Of course, al-Qaeda, Pakistani terror groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and the whole alphabet soup of groups, the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. I could go on and on with these groups, that many of which still exist to this day, that served in what is described as Al-Qaeda's Brigade 055, basically of the Taliban's Foreign Legion of Al-Qaeda linked fighters that still to this day are that fight within the Taliban ranks. Some of these groups have rolled into the Taliban's military to this day. And Al-Qaeda, I'm not sure if you want me to go here right now, but I can tell you the state of play in Afghanistan is absolutely horrific, despite what President Biden and President Trump really hasn't commented on Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But President Biden said Al-Qaeda's defeated.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. The link between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, very well established. I'm curious your thoughts. I mean, the U.S. swings a very big stick when it comes to military power. I think a common mistake people make is they underestimate their enemy. Our enemy learns as well. And, we were definitely hunting Al-Qaeda personnel early on in that engagement in Afghanistan and Operation Enduring Freedom. But they also learned, like, hey, if 5 of us get together and use a cell phone, we get vaporized. So we're not going to do that. Let's be disaggregate. Let's communicate in a different means. Yeah, the messaging was, hey, we destroyed and vaporized Al-Qaeda. that they're back. I'm curious your thoughts. Did we really destroy them when we were there, or did we just push them into new territory and out of that region until they had time to come back?
We never defeated al-Qaeda. We hurt them badly. I go back to the Battle of Tora Bora, where we had much of al-Qaeda's top leadership bottled up. This was in 2001, 2002, Tora Bora Mountains in eastern Afghanistan. And to me, one of the, if I was in charge, I tell you, I would have thrown every unit that you could mobilize at them, get the 101st, get the full 82nd, get that 75th Ranger, get all the Ranger regiments in there, get all your SF, surround that area, 101st or 10th Mountain, get them all in there, say, walk out in 48 hours or nothing walks out. We don't leave a blade of grass, a frog, or a tree in this area. But we didn't. We leaned on tribal militias, and this was part of Secretary Rumsfeld's, minimal force deployment. I forget there's a name for it back then, but economy of force, whatever it was. But we relied on Afghan allies to bottle up the Taliban as our special forces went in and tried to root them out. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, of course, slipped out. Bin Laden, we knew he was there, and others. They slipped into Pakistan. They reestablished, and they never were defeated. And then they came back, and they've helped the Taliban since. I mean, we have numerous, when we went through Bin Laden's documents, I found numerous reports of al-Qaeda talking about how they support the Taliban, how they help build the Pakistani Taliban, how they helped write the Pakistani Taliban charter, how they kind of got a little upset when they perceived the Pakistani Taliban, which, by the way, is just the Afghan Taliban on the other side of the Duran line or the border, how they were upset and ordered the Pakistani Taliban leaders to not poach al-Qaeda leaders, things like that. So they never were defeated. It didn't happen. I remember writing something on this probably 15 years ago, maybe it was about 10 years ago. Remember President Bush had like a piece of paper and cross names off, and it was 75% killed of al-Qaeda's top leadership. Then President Obama did something and another 66% were killed. And then, how many times are we going to say that al-Qaeda is, and then I just sort of mock this. We used the D word when it came to al-Qaeda: decimated, degraded, defeated, done. There's a whole bunch of them that I'm forgetting at this point in time, but that's how they've been described. And that was never the case. Even when President Trump signed the Doha agreement with the Taliban, you had Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, saying, well, the Taliban is going to destroy, yet another D word, al-Qaeda. And I haven't tracked a single raid that the Taliban have done against al-Qaeda.
Why would he say that?